got a couple minutes here. You need to speak in English right here. Just say good morning, everybody. We'd like to begin.
Right now?
No, not yet. Just a second.
They start when I do, okay? They start when it's time, okay?
Yeah, as soon as I tell you, I'll tell you. And you can say good morning, everybody. We're going to begin. Guess I should get rid of my gum, huh? Up here just chewing away.
Angela.
Angela, are you going to speak today? She's going to.
I'm going to say he.
Oh, very good. Then I think it's about time for your announcement. I'm going to go close the door and you can begin whenever you want, Angela.
Thank you. Okay.
Good morning, everyone.
We're going to start the service.
Good morning, everyone.
We're ready to start the service.
We're ready to start
The service.
the service.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Angela. My lead gal there. All right. Well, first off, now you know this is what we did in school. We sat in the back of the room, and so after, 52 years, you still haven't learned anything, and you still get called out. So, there you go. All right. Well, first of all, I want to apologize ahead of time. As my Uncle Dan would say, for my 8th grade sense of humor, if it comes out. And I sometimes, as you know, find humor in just about everything. So I ask for your forgiveness now. And, I hope this will go well. I tried several times to get my brother and Alice to move to Florida. But as usual, he had to have his way. It's too hot, too cold, too hot, too much traffic, and there are old people that live there. So here we are today, freezing our butts off, and it's 79 degrees in Florida. And they have a national cemetery down there too, very close to our house here. So I don't know what he was thinking at the time. He just wouldn't listen. Thank you for coming today to celebrate the life of my brother. There's so much I can say about him, stories to tell that would make you laugh so hard you'd be in tears, and we've been sharing some of those already as we've been here this morning. The highs and lows of one's life. Other times you would scratch your head and just say, what was he thinking? How can you tell his life story in just a few minutes? My brother was a kind person who made friends easily. He had the gift of gab. He made his mark in the world by his goodness and generosity to his friends and family, or whoever needed a helping hand. He would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. He never met a stranger. I always looked up to my brother for being the honorable, big-hearted man he was. He was a husband 4 times. Wife 3 and 4 are here today. They are best of friends. Wife 1 and 2 preceded him in death. He is a father of 4. Jimmy, Angie, who died at the age of 26 in 1994 with cancer, Danielle, and Morgan. And it's, as I was just talking with Jimmy, it's hard to believe that those kids are soon to be 60, in their 50s and 30s, and you wonder where the time went. He had 10 grandchildren, 12 great-grandchildren, and he was our big brother. He loved his children and grandkids. He did the very best for his family. Even as the kids grew and had families of their own, he was always ready and willing to provide a helping hand, and they could always count on him. There's my sister, Mary Ann. Did Dorothy? Yeah, right here. Did Dorothy make it? No, but you can say it. Okay. Yeah, okay. Sister Mary Ann, and of course she does not like to be called Mary, and her very best friend forever and ever and ever calls her Mary. Won't call her Mary Ann, calls her Mary, and it just drives her nuts. But she loves her just the same. And of course, the baby of the family, which is me, and the one that my mother always loved the best, according to my sister. Just a little background of us. We, Bub, Sis, and I were brought up by a single mother. We lived in a 579 square foot, 2-bedroom home on Bergen Street across from T and Lamb. And every time I come home, I always drive by there because that's our home. And when you look at it, and I'm the same for you guys and Rick and Jeff and Al there, it just kind of humbles you as to where you are now with what you have. We didn't have much, but you would never know it. Our saving grace was we had a godly mother, and then, of course, in the Old Testament, she would be called a righteous woman. She carried a heavy load trying to provide and raise us kids. She taught us the right and wrong, to be honest and fair, and treat people with respect, and she provided us with guidance and love that instilled a moral compass for us to follow. My brother was 7 years older than I am. He was 79, and 2 years older than my sister. So if you do the math, you can tell how old my sister really is. And with her new gray hair, for those who knew what color it used to be, she doesn't look a day over 60. And as we were growing up, he was not around much for me. When you're 16 and 17 years old, little brothers take a back seat to cars and girls. He seemed to have had a few of each. He was not at all interested in going to high school his junior and senior year. In fact, he missed school more than he attended. He wasn't what people back then would call a hoodlum. That's a term you never hear today, but that's what our mom would call people who did that. He wasn't a hoodlum, or he didn't roam the streets to see what he could get into at night. He actually had a job working the night shift at Sicily's Pizzeria. And for all of us who are in town right here, we know where Sicily's is and how long it's been in business, and the best pizza in town and everything. By the time he got home early in the morning, he wouldn't want to go to school. And again, I think that the cars and the girls were also a big part of that. I'd like to tell you how my brother ended up joining the Navy. My mother wanted us to get an education. However, when my brother turned 17 in August of 1962, our mom signed for him to join the Naval Reserves. He would be deferred from going on active duty until he graduated high school. He excelled in the reserves through his monthly participation in drill status. And to go on to say, for those of us who went to Bendel, who knew Mr. Hudnut, who was the principal at the time of the high school, and then later on he retired from being the principal and he became our teacher for civics in ninth grade. He and my mother would often have conversations about my brother's lack of attendance at school. Mr. Hudnut called the commanding officer of the Reserve Center and explained to him that my brother was not attending classes as required. Mr. Hudnut withdrew him from school, and the U.S. Navy called him to active duty in March of 1964, which was a shock to him. But to this day, my brother would agree this was the best thing for him that could have happened at the time. My brother didn't find out until much later, that my mom and Mr. Hudnut had a plan to encourage him to pursue a career in the Navy. My brother excelled in his basic and advanced Navy courses in communication. He also completed his GED and high school diploma while on active duty. The Navy provided him with challenges, gave him direction, structure, and a meaningful purpose. My brother always had a strong work ethic and morals. He just didn't like to go to high school. Sis and I would call this divine intervention, just not the same level of Moses parting the Red Sea or Esther saving the Jewish people during their captivity in Persia. You just never know when or where someone will come into your life and help you find your way. And our mom prayed a lot for my brother. My brother dedicated 22 years of his life to serving his country. His leadership qualities and unwavering commitment to his shipmates would have a positive impact on the men and women who served alongside him. He served on board several naval ships, the USS Fisk, USS McDonough, USS Sutherland, and the USS England. He completed 3 tours in Vietnam. He made 3 deployments to the Western Pacific and Asia, and 2 deployments to the Mediterranean Sea. Each deployment would last between 6 and 9 months. He had a lot of sea time. He also served at several shore commands, including Naval Communication Station Guam, Naval Communication Station in the Philippines, the Naval Station Stockton, California, a tour of duty at the Pentagon, and his last duty station was with the Commander-in-Chief of Naval Forces for the European Theater in London, England. He retired as a radioman chief petty officer in August of 1984. Following his retirement over the next 20 years, he worked with the Naval Air Systems Command as a government contractor overseeing the installations of communication systems on board newly commissioned ships. My brother was a car enthusiast, as most of you guys know, just by looking at his driveway. In fact, the picture that was up on the screen that showed the picture of his house right there in Virginia, well, normally if you pulled up in the driveway, there would be 3 or 4 cars. 3 or 4, there were like 16. Yeah. They had a big backyard, and so, yeah, big difference from what you saw there right there too. So, he owned many classic cars over the years, but his pride and joy, which again was one of the pictures that you saw, was a 1957 Chevy convertible he bought for $60 in 1974 while stationed in San Diego. For 15 years, this car was pushed, driven, or towed across the United States, from San Diego to Michigan, to Virginia, and finally to South Carolina, where eventually it was completely restored to show quality. My brother could fix just about anything. He was mechanically and electronically inclined. He could tear an engine down, put it back together without having an extra part. One of his many skills I always wished that I possessed. Somehow we always seem to find that extra nut and bolt somewhere and shake our head. A few years later, in 1999, he did sell the car for $55,000. Unfortunately, we'll never know how much he actually had into it. I think he took that to the grave with him. So Alice never knew what the final dollar sign to that was, but he had it for a long time. Anytime you traveled with my brother, whether it was to a car show or on a trip, we always had an adventure. You never knew what was going to happen along the way. It never failed. At least one time during any trip, you would end up alongside the road, somewhere fixing a flat, replacing a part, needing a jump, or waiting on a tow truck. At the time of the occurrence, it wasn't so pleasant, but afterwards we could always find humor and laugh about it. And it didn't matter if you were driving an old or a new vehicle. As luck would have it, once we were returning from Michigan to South Carolina, he was driving, I had a new Chevy Silverado, 2008 Chevy Silverado at the time. We're in the middle of Kentucky, he's driving, and he manages to run over a steel strap in the road. And the next thing you know, we're pulling off the side of the road because we have a flat tire. We got the tire changed, continued on our way home. It wasn't funny at the time, but after you get on down the road, again, with our luck, we laughed our butts off about it. You just took your chances when traveling with my brother. I wouldn't trade it for anything. We made a lot of memories. In 1972, I joined the Navy at the age of 19. Well, this is the funny part, only because my draft number was low. My buddies back there, theirs were high, so they got to stick around. But like Sis says, there's a reason for everything. And I went on to have a successful Navy career. One thing that this did was to bring me closer to my brother. He and I were fortunate enough to be stationed close together. Finally, after the years apart, that we were able to be on equal ground. I was a car enthusiast as he was. We were able to share our Navy stories with each other. We knew the missions. We were able to speak the same language. It was a bond that drew us together. Both retiring from the Navy, veterans in arms, patriots, and proud that we were able to serve together. I'm thankful today for the memories, the adventures, and the stories that live on.
This poem is traditionally read at Navy retirements and at ceremonies like this one. It's called The Watch. For 22 years, this sailor has stood the watch. While some of us were in our bunks at night, this sailor stood the watch. While some of us were in school learning our trade, this shipmate stood the watch. Yes, even before some of us were born into this world, this shipmate stood the watch. In those years when the storm clouds of war were seen brewing on the horizon of history, this shipmate stood the watch. Many times he would cast an eye ashore and see his family standing there, needing his guidance and help, needing that hand to hold during those hard times. But he still stood the watch. He stood the watch for 22 years. He stood the watch so that we, our families, and our fellow countrymen could sleep soundly and safely each and every night, knowing that a sailor stood the watch. Today, we are here to say, shipmate, the watch stands relieved. Relieved by those you have trained, guided, and led. Shipmate, you stand relieved. We have the watch.
Now we're going to play the first of one of the songs that he liked, and it's called If Not for Grace.
Where would I be? You only know. I'm glad you see through eyes of love a hopeless case, an empty place, if not for grace. Where would I be? You only know. I'm glad you see through eyes of love a hopeless case, an empty place, if not for grace. And I thank you for the things I cannot see. Lord, you've been a shelter in the storms of life, a shield surrounding me. And I thank you for the mercy you provide. And though you could have walked away, you stayed 1,000 times. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. I once was lost, but now I'm found. A hopeless case, an empty place, if not for grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. And I once was lost, but now I'm found. A hopeless case, an empty place, if not for grace. Where would I be? You only know. I'm glad you see through eyes of love a hopeless case, an empty place, if not for grace. A hopeless case, an empty place, if not for grace.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Morgan, and I'm the baby of the family, the one in her 30s, just so we're clear. Dad once told me I was the product of his midlife crisis, meaning my mom was the midlife crisis. Wife number 3, yeah. I wanted to share a story about my dad that I think truly captures who he was. It took place during a routine shopping trip to Sam's Club when I was around 13 or 14. Dad had bought a few big ticket items, including a new generator. As we were leaving, he noticed that the generator hadn't been rung up and was missing from the receipt. Without hesitation, he turned right around and headed back into the store. As a teenager, I thought, they missed it. Why are you going back inside? But Dad insisted that honesty was the only way to go. He said it would be dishonest to notice and leave without making it right. That was who he was, always doing the right thing, even if it didn't benefit him. A few years later, I had a moment that made me realize just how much of his character had rubbed off on me. I was checking out at a grocery store, and I had a few cases of pop under my cart that I forgot to scan. As I headed towards the door, I noticed the mistake. I immediately heard Dad's words echo in my head. It would be dishonest to notice and leave without making it right. I turned around, went back through the line, paid for the items, and left. As I was walking out, a man followed me to my car and told me that he had seen what I did, and not many people would have bothered these days. I smiled and I told him, that's how I was raised. In many ways, Dad's actions taught me how to live a life with integrity. He showed me that doing the right thing isn't always the easiest path, but it's the one that makes you proud of who you are. He left us with more than memories. He left us with a legacy of honor and a way of living that I will carry with me always. While we will all miss Dad's presence, his example will continue to guide us. We can honor him by living with the same honesty, strength, and integrity that he showed each and every day. Thank you, Dad, for everything. We love you.
This next song is one of Bubba's favorites by Vince Gill, Go Rest High on the Mountain. And you can sing along if you want to.
I know your life on earth was trouble. And only you could know the pain. You weren't afraid to face the devil. You were no stranger to the rain. So go rest high on that mountain. Son, your work on earth is done. Go to heaven and shout love for the Father and the Son. Oh, how we cried the day you left us. We gathered round your grave to grieve. Wish I could see angels' faces when they hear
Anybody need a tissue? In case anybody doesn't know me, I'm Alice, wife number 4, who he married for love. Yeah, that too. I look around this room and all I see is family. I wasn't gonna finish. People who loved Smitty. Couldn't help but love Smitty. He was a good, kind, wonderful man. And gave me the best years of my life. And just so you know, every tear is a memory, and we have a lot. I just want to thank you all for being the friends and the relatives that loved him so much and came here to pay your final respects. And I know he's looking down and real proud of everybody. We were talking today about gravestones, because you should talk about that at a funeral. And the director asked me, you know, what would you like to have on the gravestone? And I said, well, if I had my choice, I'd say happy feet. Because if you knew Smitty, you knew at the drop of a hat he was dancing. Didn't matter. Commercial came on, he was dancing. He danced 2 nights before he passed. He stood up in the memory center. They played some music, and he held on to the pastor's arms, and he danced his feet off. They said he was jumping up and down and having the best time ever. He couldn't speak, but he could dance. And that is his soul. We're all going to miss him, but he's touched us all. And thank you all for loving him and being here.
I don't really need this paper here. I am going to write a book one day. And because most of our family, you're all family here, you all have heard the stories. It's like the word of the Lord. It never gets old. All the stories when we have reunions at the Smith place, they all get together, and there's a lot of them, and they always want to hear the same stories that they've been hearing for so many years. And nobody ever wants to miss those reunions, because somebody might tell the story about them, and they want to make sure you get it right. So, and it's hard to know, it was hard to know where to start. And Doc and I did not get together to write what we were going to say. But it was funny after we were going to practice last night, see how this went. It went real good at home. We played the music and everything, didn't we, Doc? And when you get to the last music that we're going to play, now we have 2 different kind of people in our family. We have Baptists and we have Pentecostals. And the Pentecostals shout. We pray out loud. They make racket at church. They're not shy. The Baptists are a little more reserved. So I'm telling you, when the last sound or the last song is played, if you can stay in your seat, go ahead. But if you feel like just praising the Lord, you can do it. You'll feel like it. There's something gets in your feet. Something gets in your hands, and you can't hardly keep them down. You know, it just makes you want to praise Him. So anyway, I didn't know really where to start this, but I'm going to start by telling you that both of our parents came from large families, and they were all Southerners. Our dad was the oldest of his siblings, and our mom was next to the youngest in her family. We were always closer at the beginning of our growing up years to the Smiths. We didn't see a lot of the Warren side until a little later. And both families were sharecroppers, and the biggest crops were cotton and soybeans. The work was real hard and not real rewarding. Back then, when you had cotton, you didn't have any machines that did the work. It was your family. It was anybody you could get to come and help you when it was time to harvest and pick that cotton. And there was a whole lot of it. And so when it was cotton picking time, if you were part of the family, didn't matter if you lived up north or where you lived, you came home and you helped getting the crop in. And we were part of that, only we didn't pick cotton. We just got to come home and be with all the relatives and Mama and Pawpaw. That's what we called our grandparents, Mama and Pawpaw. They worked every day in that cotton field in the planting and harvesting times, and they worked every day except for Sunday. And Saturday they worked to noon. And every day they came home at the same time for dinner. We call lunch dinner down there. And then you have supper. And what you had for dinner was what was left over for supper. And you didn't put it in the refrigerator. You didn't do any of those things. You just covered it up with the tablecloth, and that's what you ate for supper. And nobody ever died of food poisoning or any such thing. In fact, they didn't start dying until they came up to Michigan. Now, that's the truth. That's the truth. So I'm just trying to give you a little background about how our families lived. And when I say that there were 2 or 3 words to define the families, and that was hard and harder. After a few years, when our aunts and uncles, my dad being the oldest, after they finally got to be a little bit older and got married, my dad would go down there and tell them how good it was up north working in the factory. He made it sound like if you came up north, you were coming to Canaan land. Everybody had a house. Everybody had bathrooms. You just had just about everything, anything you could think of. And when we were in the South, you had nothing. Nothing. You hardly had a change of clothes. So Dad made it sound so good. And pretty soon, his sisters and brothers began coming up north to live in Canaan land. We always headed south again when school got out, and we stayed there until someone would come and get us. One day, when Bub had just turned 8, we had been down at Mama and Pawpaw's house all summer, and it was time to start school, but nobody came to get us. So Bub started to tell Mama that he really wanted to buy a pair of Levi's to start school in, and he wanted a new pair. He didn't want anybody's patched or hand-me-down blue jeans. So Mama asked him, said, well, do you have any money? And he said, no. She said, well, now get this. This was probably like 1953 or 4 maybe. And she said they cost 75 cents at the general store. And said, if you don't have any money, there's no way you can buy those jeans. And he said, well, how could I make some money? And he's 8 years old. She said, well, the only thing I know is you'd have to go to the field and pick a sack of cotton. And he said, well, I think I could do it. And she said, I don't think you could. She said, but if you're going to get them jeans, you're going to have to make your own money. So the next morning, when they got up, here they heard him coming. And he was all dressed, and he told them, he said, well, I'm going to go to the field today. He said, I'm going to pick that sack of cotton. And Mama and Papa didn't really think he would last very long, but I want you to know he picked that sack of cotton. And he did get those 75-cent Levi's, and we're not really sure if he really picked the whole sack to pay for them or if Papa or somebody put in some money. But Bub will tell you, if he could talk to you now, he would say, no, they didn't. I picked a sack, and it paid for those jeans. So I rest on that maybe he did. I don't know. When we came to Michigan, and Dad got a job in the shop, but for some reason, the Canaan land he talked about to his brothers and sisters, I don't know where we were in the desert, because there was no Canaan land for us. But for some reason, we never stayed in one place very long. We moved all the time. And if I could tell you how many times we really moved, you wouldn't believe it. But I'm going to tell you that when I was in the 4th grade and Bub was in the 5th grade, we went to 3 schools in 1 year. 3. From September to May. And all those three schools that we went to twice. We'd be there a couple of months, then we'd move. Then we'd go another place, get that school, that was the second school, we'd be there for a little bit, and then we'd go back to the first one. And then after that one, then we move again, and we might go to the 3rd school. And then the next one, we'd be back to the 2nd. So we had 3 schools that both times we went to twice during that, from September to May. So you can figure out how many times we moved. Now, I'm not going to tell you what we were running from, but you probably could figure out that either the rent wasn't being paid, or there was something big like that. So that's what I'm going to stick with. Dad wasn't paying the rent, so we had to move. So anyway, our teachers thought we were just hillbillies. They didn't waste a lot of time on us. And some things are better left out of somebody's life story. But one thing that you should know, that our mom had a plan. Sometimes the decision that you make in your life can change everything. That was one of them. My mom, like Doc said, was really a praying mom. When we could go to church, we were in church. But sometimes, and we didn't own a car, in that Canaan land place, we didn't own a car, didn't have a TV, no indoor toilet, one spigot in the kitchen with no hot water, and that was our Canaan land. And I can only remember really 2 houses that we lived in growing up that even had an indoor toilet and hot water. And we didn't get to stay in them very long. And then the next one would be not so good. So that's kind of how our life was. And you're looking at 3 kids here, grown-ups now, but you're looking at 3 people that should have been tragedies. Statistics say when you grow up on welfare with just your mother running the ship, and you change living places all the time, that probably you're going to turn out to be not such good citizens. That's what statistics said. But my mom and God had a plan. And I wish we'd known it a little bit sooner, Doc. I wish we could have seen the plan a little bit plainer than us having to grow up. I really wish that. So she made a decision that changed our life. When we came to Flint in April of 1957, we left with very little, and we came with one medium suitcase. It held just about all of our clothes, my mom's and us 3 kids. And that's no exaggeration, that's the truth. We'll never know how Mom got in touch with her family in Flint, but when we came home from school on that Friday, Mom told us that we were going to go to Flint for a visit. She told us 2 of her brothers were going to come and get us. That night when we got to Flint, her family had prepared a meal, and it was hot dogs. And to us kids that never got to go out to eat, we never really had hot dogs as kids growing up. We had beans, potatoes, things like that, but not things like hot dogs and hamburgers and stuff like that. And they had hot dogs for us, and we thought that was the best thing that we had just about ever had. We really enjoyed it. And we didn't find out that we were going to be staying in Flint until that Sunday afternoon. We left on a Friday, and Sunday is when they brought us all in and told us that we were not going to be going back over to Pontiac, that we were going to be staying there in Flint. Me and Bub were not happy about it. Bub was 11, Doc was 5, and I was 10. We weren't happy about it because we didn't really know the Warren side of the family too well. We didn't know them real good. So we weren't too happy about that. And then they told us that Bub was going to be staying with Uncle Miriam and his family, and I was going to be staying with Uncle Tom and his family, and Mom and Doc were going to stay together at Uncle Pete's. And we got to see each other on the weekends sometimes, and we tried to all stay together like that, but we had to live with different family members because Mom was trying to get a place that she could live with us kids, and we had no money coming in, so she was waiting to get a big check from the welfare. It took over 3 months for her to finally be able to get, she hates that word, welfare, but that's how long it took. And somebody told one of her brothers that they had a house that hadn't been lived in for a long time, but that if she could clean it up, that she could have that house for free. Well, she didn't even go look at it. She just said, yes, we was going to take that house. And for those of you that grew up in Burton, that first house, again, Canaan land here, was on Williamson Street. Right down the street from where we lived there, from when we got to all be together and come over into that house, we were so happy. Doug Henry lived on the corner in a big fancy house. Yes. Lorraine LaForest lived right directly across the street from us, and she lived in a very nice house. Very nice house. And then down on the corner was Zon's Bar, and Danny White's grandmother owned a little restaurant down there on the corner. So that was our introduction to Burton. And when we lived on Williamson Street and we all got together and got to come over and see the house, it had a fuel oil burner in the living room, and every winter it froze. The oil line froze up. Had no heat in the house but that, and it was so cold. It had no indoor toilet, one spigot in the sink, and it was like we already played this game before. We already lived in this house before. It looked like just some of the other ones we'd lived in. But I am telling you, you cannot know how happy we were Just my mom and us 3 kids. You cannot possibly know. And you cannot possibly know what we came out of. You cannot know how God kept us. This was absolutely a divine intervention. And I wish we could have known. I wish we could have known. It wasn't much of a house, but it was free and we were together. And Mom told us when we all were there together, she said, you kids are going to have to work to get spending money because there's no money coming in. And she said, you're going to have to stick together and you're going to have to pull together and we're going to get through all this. And so when she said that we all had to stick together, Bub thought that he was the boss. He tried bossing us around. I could hold my own with Bub. Doc being the kid, 5 years old at the time, Bub was always trying to boss him. Get him to do this, go down here and do this, and run to the store over here. And really, it was him that was supposed to go to the store. But he would want Doc, go down here to the corner and get this and whatever. Finally, Doc had enough of it. And I can't prove it, but I think he coined the phrase, hey, you're not the boss of me. And he said it very often to Bub. Bub had many jobs as a kid, and when I say as a kid, I mean before we were in junior high. He had a lot of jobs. He shoveled snow, he painted fences, he pushed those old ice cream carts that you used to get, and they had bells on them, and you had to push them down. Everybody knows that lived here in Burton. Pushed them down the road. They weren't paved back then, it was gravel. They had potholes that were deeper than me. And if he was, I wouldn't say lucky enough, but if he got to push the ice cream cart in the area where we lived, he never made any money because everybody was bumming an ice cream off of him. You know, oh, come on, because they were 10 cents. And that was a lot of money. And they would bum ice cream off of him, and he couldn't say no. So when he had to turn the cart in at night, of course he didn't make any money. He didn't make any money. So that was a bust. That was a bad job. He ran errands. He worked in the neighborhood store. Remember Parnes' store across from Tea and Lamb? Every kid, I think, in our neighborhood worked at that store, except me and Doc. But that's what, he worked there. And then finally, he hit the big time at Sicily's Pizza. He did learn to make a pizza, and he could twirl the dough above his head. But the problem was, they worked him way too many hours, and it really began to interfere with school. We never had a car or a telephone, no TV that ever worked, and Bub spent many hours at Springs drugstore testing the TV tubes to try to get it to work. Very little success. Mom always told us, and she was real big on this, don't tell our business. We never did find out exactly what business she was talking about, but we were sure of one thing, that we didn't tell it. To describe to you how we really lived would be unbelievable to many of you. There's not enough time to begin to tell it all, but we all needed each other and we stuck together. Bub went to school every day until he got to the 10th grade. And then, it's funny because Doc mentioned this, he liked girls, cars, and dancing. He never missed a dance if he could help it, from the 7th grade to the 9th grade. It cost a nickel to get in for the noontime dances at Bendel. He always went, and you know how most guys, I don't know how this was at your school, but at our school, the guys would sit on the edge of the gymnasium at the stage. They wouldn't get down and fast dance, but they'd slow dance with you. Well, Bub wasn't one of them. If the music was going, his feet were going. And he danced the fast, the slow. He would have danced even if there was no music. That's the kind of guy that he was. He really, really, really liked music and liked to dance. And I might tell you that both sides of our family, the Warrens and the Smiths, were all good singers, musicians, preachers on both sides of the family, a lot of them. So music came naturally in our family. When you didn't have anything else to do, you got together and you would sing songs and just whatever. We had a really good fellowship going there. So for the 9th grade, it finally came about that Bub needed a sport jacket. It was for the prom, the 9th grade prom, and for 9th grade graduation. Yes, there was a picture of it, and I hope that you got to see it, because you're going to get what I'm about to tell you. He didn't have one, never owned one, and so he was telling Mom, well, I need that. And she said, well, let me think about it. Now, when she said she was going to think about it, what she really meant was that she was going to pray about it. So between that day that Bub told her he needed one and the next day, she had a plan. She said, here's what we're going to do. She said, I'm going to call one of my nephews, and the nephew, you girls will know, was Sonny. I'm going to call Sonny and see if he'll make a trade, because he had a lot of sport jackets. She said, I'm going to call him and see if he'll make a trade for the mandolin. She had an old mandolin that my dad used to play, and nobody played it in our house, so she said, I'm going to call him and see if he'll take a trade and let you have one of his sport jackets. So she called him, and it wasn't on our phone. She had to use a neighbor's phone, and called him and asked him, would he be willing to do that? And he said, yeah. So he gave Bub, sight unseen, the jacket that you see him wearing for his 9th grade prom and graduation on one of those slides. He thought he was looking good, and we thought he was too, until we look at it today. It was way too big for him. That jacket didn't nowhere near fit him, but he thought he looked good. We thought he looked good, and that's all that mattered. And looking back, we know it was way too big, and he wasn't looking all that good, but nobody told him. Now let's talk about his cars. Doc thinks he knows them. He'll remember all these. None of the cars that he ever got were any good. But here was his remark when we said that. He said, it's better than walking. They usually only ran for a few weeks, and then you had to walk home from wherever it stopped. One day he came home. This was the worst of the bunch. He came home with a 57 Plymouth that he had bought from one of his girlfriend's moms. You would have had to see this to comprehend what I am telling you. It was so rusted out everywhere. The front floorboards, there was no floorboard, so Bub put in boards, you know, like 2x4s across the front of the floor so that your feet wouldn't dangle. Now, this is the truth, and I wish I knew the name of the girl that he got that from her mom, because she should have gave it to him for free. So he put that in there, and then it was so rusty, and then not only that, but the key was broke off in the starter, so you had to use a screwdriver to start the car. And then, let's see here, I got to find my place. and and I told you about the front floorboards. Okay. You could see the ground. And when it rained, if you were riding in the front seat, you could get muddy because it would come up between the cracks of the boards that he put down if you weren't careful. When he was driving these old beat-up cars, you would have thought that he was somebody, the way that he was so proud that he was the one that was able to buy his own cars. One day I was sitting on the front porch. I saw him coming down the road in that car. He pulled in the driveway, and all of a sudden, what's the matter? I knocked it off. Oh, all of a sudden I knocked it off. That's about what happened with the car. I was sitting on the porch. He come tooling in the driveway, and all of a sudden, he disappeared. The rapture did not take place. He disappeared, but the car kept moving. I ran to see what happened, and you guessed it. The floorboards in the front gave way. His butt hit the ground. His feet were still up here on the pedals, but his butt was down here. And it finally came to a stop, almost at the back fence where Roger Fouch's house was right behind us. He got it stopped, and when he saw what happened, we started laughing and could not hardly stop. That car didn't last much longer. Finally, he got a decent-looking running, the only one that I ever knew of that was decent, a 55 running Chevy. It was the one that he taught me to drive on. It was a stick shift on the column, and he was a good teacher, but it took me several tries to be able to get up a hill without rolling back down. He was getting ready to leave for basic training, and I asked him if, while he was gone, if I could drive his car. And he said no. At first he said no, but I persisted, and he said, well, if you promise that you'll take care of my car while I'm gone, you can drive it. And I said, okay, so I promised him. The very first day that I took out that good running 55 Chevy, he was gone already. I took it out alone. I was only out for about 1 hour, and I hear this clunk, like something fell. I get out to see what happened. It was the muffler. The muffler fell off. The car was so loud, and I just knew it was my fault. I was driving it, and somehow the muffler fell off. I was crying in the car, and one of the neighbor guys came out to see what I was crying about. And I said, well, I'm driving my brother's car. His muffler fell off, and my brother's never going to let me drive his car again. He said it could easily be fixed, so he put it in the trunk of the car, and he told me to go see Jay Henry at his garage, and he could fix it for me, and Bub would never know. So Jay charged me $10. It was good as new. I parked it in our driveway, and I decided I was never taking that car out again. That one time was enough for me. So I brought it back home, left it there, didn't take it out again. And then he comes home from basic training. He asked me how his car was. And I said, oh, and he said, did you take good care of it? And I said, I sure did. I didn't tell him nothing about the muffler. He goes out, gets in it, starts it up, comes back in, and he says to me, what'd you do to my car? I said, nothing. He said, and I said, I only drove it once, and that's all. He said, I know you did something to my car. So then I said, well, the muffler fell off, and I had to have it put back on. And I told him how much it cost me. I took it to Jay Henry, and he put it back on. So now it's good as new. He started laughing, and he said, and I said, how did you know that that I did something to your car? He said, well, the muffler was only tied on with a rope. And I could see that the rope was gone and it sounded better. He said, the rope burned. That's why the muffler fell off. He said, I was going to have it fixed later when I got home, but he said, I'm glad that it fell off and that you had to pay for it on your dime. Oh, some of these things. And you know, he truly did not meet. You could go anywhere and he would meet somebody. And I have to tell you that one of the things, and I'll get to that in a minute, but one of the things was that in 1989, Jamie and I really needed some help. And I probably would have never gone to Bub's house for the help. But Doc was overseas at the time in Italy. Doc would have been really the one that I would have selected to go to for help because, you know, Bub's kind of like nutty. Yeah. And, you know, Bub is kind of nutty. He's friends with everybody, and you never know what's going to be going on at his house. So, but Doc wasn't there. So when Jamie and I had to go there, we had been living with him for a couple of months, and finally it was time for us to get our own place. So we find our place, but we have no furniture. We're supposed to be getting some, and the moving truck is bringing it, but they weren't supposed to be there till Saturday before Labor Day. And the guys at work were going to be our help unloading the truck. That moving guy got there 3 days before he was supposed to be there. And I told him that. And he said, but I want to know if I can unload anyway. And I said, no, we don't have anybody to help. He said, well, I tell you. He said, I'm not supposed to help. He said, but if you can get me one person, one guy to come and help me, the two of us can get it done and I can get out of here and get on the road. You're going to know about this. You're going to know, Karen. So I said, okay. So I had to call, make sure I could get off. Bub called, see if he could get off, because I asked him if he could help. He said, yeah. So it was just me and him. At the time, I weighed 90 pounds. I think Bub might have weighed 120, 125, something like that. So we get there, and the truck's already there. And I said, my brother will be here in just a minute. So finally, Bub's pulling up to the curb, and the guy that has the truck weighs about 250, 300 pounds, and he's about 6'5". And then Bub comes. He jumps out of the car, and I said, oh, my brother's here. He jumps out. He looks at me. He looks at him. He says, my God, lady, is that the best you could do? And I said, well, we were supposed to have other help, but you came too early. And I said, but he and I are used to moving. We can move anything you've got. We can do it. So we did. We all three moved stuff, and we got it in the house, and finally, it was the afternoon. It was pretty late, and I said to Bub, well, with him helping, I think that we should at least take him to dinner. And so we asked him if he wanted to go to dinner. He said, yeah. We got to Poor Boys, was eating dinner, and Bub says to him, well, what do you do when you're not doing this? He said, well, I was in the Navy. Bub said, yeah, I retired from the Navy. Yeah, well, where was you stationed? San Diego. Yeah, me too. When was you there? Then we find out that this moving guy that we never laid eyes on, that lives in Texas and is delivering our furniture from Oklahoma, he knows all of the friends that my brother has. My brother knows the friends that he has. They just never met those two. His name was Jim. You remember that? And from that time on, every time that truck driver had a load and came through Virginia, where did he stay, Karen? At your house, at Bub and Karen's house. You know, because he was a lifetime friend. That's what I'm talking about. You never knew what was going to happen. There's no way to take you through his entire life, but Bub's kindness and generosity seemed to go beyond his means, but somehow he tried to find a way. Some of you here today have benefited by his kindness and generosity. Jamie and I were some of them, for which words cannot begin to tell you. He never did it for fame or fortune, and I know some things did cost him a small fortune. And I hope that those of us that benefited by that kindness, that you'll pay it forward when you get a chance. I'm coming to the end of this, but I just want to tell you that when Bub was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, later they changed it to Parkinson's with Lewy bodies. But when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he wasn't a believer back then. He wasn't a heathen. I wouldn't say he was a heathen. He's always been good. But Doc and I and my mom and more people than I could name, and probably those of you that are sitting out here, you have no idea whose prayer list you're on. You have no idea. You may think that you're all about yourself and you're all alone, but trust me, you're on somebody's prayer list. And for those of us that know that God answers prayer, you're one prayer away. You're one prayer away from a life-changing thing in your life. And so when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it was like, I was asking Alice today, around 2015 we think, and maybe it could have even been a little before that it really started, but we didn't know. But signs were there. But at first, you know, he's still normal. He's normal. He looks fine. You can't hardly believe that he's got anything wrong with him. And as time went on, it seemed like very quickly he began to forget how to use a telephone. He couldn't use his cell phone. He couldn't work the TV. He finally, at the very end, he would even forget who people were, couldn't call your name, lost his ability to speak. And Doc and I were very concerned about that because he wasn't what we call saved. He wasn't saved. And we would talk to him. He would let you talk to him about the Lord. In fact, he called me all the time. If he wanted me to pray about you, Morgan, if he wanted me to pray about something, it was always me he was calling. And one time I told him, I said, Bub, I'm not going to pray for you anymore. I'm not praying about all that stuff anymore. You need to get a hold of the Lord for yourself. And he said, well, you can't quit praying. I depend on you. And truly, he would let you talk to him about the Lord, but he never would consent to saying the sinner's prayer, or even he's not going to church. He just knew somebody was going to lay hands on him and touch him or something. And I said, well, if you just sit there, like most people, they'll think you're part of the church. Just go and sit there. Nobody's going to bother you. But he wouldn't do it. So he would call me when he got out to Washington. He called me more often than he did when he was in Gladwin. And he called me. It was 8:30 in the morning my time, and if you know me, I don't get up till 10 o'clock. I stay up late and I sleep late. And it was 5:30 in the morning his time. He called me, and I asked him, I said, well, what are you doing? And he said, well, I've been fighting demons all night. And I said, you don't even know what a demon is. Now, you have to understand, Bub could not speak most of the time. He could not say a sentence. He could not give you the words that he wanted to say. And on this morning, he was totally lucid and could speak as clearly as I am today. And he said, I'm calling you because they were trying to get me to go with them. There was 3 of them. And I told them that they could kiss my butt. I wasn't going. That's what he's telling me the story. And I said, well, I'm glad you didn't go. And again, I thought he was just not being lucid. And then he says to me, well, he said, I'm calling because I need to get that religion. And I said, you mean you want to be saved? And he said, yes. Well, I'm telling you, I got awake in a hurry. And Doc and I, a few years before that, we were concerned that when you lose your mind, and maybe he would never get to the point that he would be lucid enough to call on the Lord. So Doc and I talked about it, and we typed up the sinner's prayer. And we put it in a frame, and we told Alice, put this on his wall in his bedroom where he can see it. And I told him, I said, now, Bub, I said, this is your Christmas gift from me and Doc. And I said, it's here so that if you ever can't remember any words to speak, you can read this off of this paper or have somebody read it to you, and you can come to the Lord. It didn't faze him one bit that we did that. But on this morning, I said, Bub, can you still read? And he said, yeah. I said, you still got that? You still got that plaque that me and Doc made for you? Yeah. I said, get it. So Alice brought it to him, and I said, we're going to say it together. I'll say it with you, the sinner's prayer. And he said, okay. So we started, and then he stopped me. He said, no, he said, I don't want you to say it. You're messing me up. He said, I'll do it by myself. And I said, okay. So he said the sinner's prayer. He got through it. And then I told him, I said, now what does it say at the end that you're saved? Are you saved? And he said, yes, I'm saved. And I said, you need to tell somebody. He said, who should I tell? And I said, well, is Alice there? And he said, yeah. I said, well, tell Alice. So he calls Alice, and he told her, I'm saved. And I went over it with him and talked to him a little bit. And he was so lucid on that whole day, wasn't he, Alice? The whole day, and he was able to speak just like normal. And then by the next day, he was kind of going back into the other. But he calls me again, and this time it's for me, 1:30 in the morning. He wants to know if I know his PIN number. And I said, no. What do you need it for? He said, well, somebody took my money. I said, you got some money? And he said, yeah. He said, I'm a millionaire. He said, do you want to be a millionaire? And I said, absolutely. Where's your money? He said, well, that's why I need the PIN number. And I said, well, I don't know where it is. I said, but I really think that you don't need it, and I don't think you probably have that much money. And he assured me that he did. And about that time, he was complaining because somebody took his money. And he couldn't find it. And Alice went in and got his wallet and brought it out to him. And he made you count it. I forget how many times. $220. And when she told him, here's your money, Smitty, he said, well, where was it? She said, it's in your wallet. It was in your room. So then he says to me, okay, bye. And then he says, oh, are the Baptists happy now? And I said, you mean because you got saved? He said, yeah. And I said, they are rejoicing, Heaven is rejoicing. The party has not ended yet. I said, everybody is rejoicing that you came to the Lord. And then he was happy. And I had to call Doc to tell him about the Baptists. And I said, you know, he didn't even ask about the Pentecostals. He just asked about the Baptists. So, there you go. There you go. But I want you to know he was as saved as anybody that has ever been what we call saved in here. He was as saved then as any of us that ever went to the altar in the church. He was saved. And I'm telling you that Romans 10:9 and 10 says that if we confess with our mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in our heart that God raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. And it goes on to say that whoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. You don't have to be anybody special. You don't have to know nothing. You can call on the name of the Lord without ever having picked up a Bible. And God's time is not our time. I've been weary, and Doc has too. We've been weary and concerned about our brother. We didn't want him missing heaven. And then I come on the scripture in Galatians 6 and 9 that says, be not weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. The trouble is that God's time is not anybody else's time. There's a plan. In God's time, our faith in Christ will not go unrewarded. It will bring forth exactly that which is promised by the Lord. Many of us have started out in this race, and we don't finish. Some of us never even start. We give up, thinking that it doesn't work, God doesn't care, and we might fail. But God will not fail. If you'll hang on, there is an answer around the corner. My mom never lived to see the success. And I say success. I'm not talking about us having being millionaires, although I wish we were. I'm not talking about that. But we didn't end up in jail, doing drugs, being an alcoholic, all those things that were in our family tree. Our dad being one of them. Even he found the Lord and made things right. Before he died, he made things right. He made things right with my mom as much as it could be made right. And I know that he made heaven his home. And they didn't live to be old. They died young. And us kids all had to stick together. And we never, with Mom and Dad both gone, we always, no matter where we lived or how far, we stayed in touch. And even when Mom was still alive and we were all in different places, she would call us and we would call her. And one of the things that she used to do, Doc had a dog before he went into the Navy. The dog's name was Penelope. And we'd call home to talk to Mom, and Mom would talk to us, and then she'd say, wait a minute, I want you to say something to Penelope. She'd put the dog on the phone, and then she'd be hollered. She's licking the phone. She's licking the phone. You know, she just wanted us to all just be together. Didn't she do that, Doc? Yeah. No matter who called, if it was me, Doc, or Bub. You want to say something to Penelope. Say something to Penelope. Talk to her. Oh, she's licking the phone. She's licking the phone. And it doesn't matter your past or your self-perceived uselessness. How many of us feel that way? We're all useless. That's what we think sometimes. God is your designer, and He knows how to make you shine. I stole that from your brother, Jim. I stole that from him. I heard him say that one time, and I liked it, and I wrote that down. And today, we prayed about Bub because he was getting worse and running out of time, we thought, but oh, what a merciful, awesome God. What a God. And before we do the last song, I just want to pray for all of us that are here. I'm not really a good prayer. I pray like I talk. It's not real formal, but I know that there are needs right here, and we're all family here. This is our family that have heard. There are so many stories that we did not tell, but because of the time. But this family here, nobody has to be bashful. Nobody has to be embarrassed by anything that may have happened, didn't happen. And one thing I know, Alice, is that God said in His Word that He bottles up our tears. I don't know what He does with them. But somehow He puts them in a bottle. And I don't know if when it gets full, that's when the prayers are answered. I don't know. But I know one thing, that He's concerned about your tears, and He sees them. And I know that He is here to meet your need today. And Lord, I bring my family and friends that are here today. I bring them to you, Lord. I don't know what they might have need of. I don't know what maybe they're facing even tomorrow. But I know one thing for sure is that you know it all. You knew the plan before we were ever even thought about in our mother's wombs. You had the plan. You knew the number of our days. Lord, I just pray that for all my family and friends that are here, God, if there's a need in their life, I pray that even today, that you will make yourself known to them and that you would begin to answer some of their prayers that they've been waiting so long for. I pray, Lord, that you'll touch each one and let them feel your presence. And Lord, I just give them to you, and I pray that everyone that is here today, that not one will miss heaven. I pray, Lord, that we'll all come to the saving grace and the knowledge of you. And if we could all but know the things that you've already done for us and the things that you have kept us from, unbeknownst to us, I pray, Lord, for your direction and for those, Lord, that have come such a mighty long way in traveling here. I pray, Lord, that you'll be with them when they make their journeys home and that you'll see them safely home and watch over their families. And I pray, Lord, that direction will come to those that are looking. Lord, I give all this to you, and I ask these things in that awesome name of Jesus. And I want to give you thanks, and I want to tell you how grateful I am. I'm grateful because you answered prayer, and it's never too late, but you're always right on time. And I'm thankful, Lord, and I'm more than thankful. Words cannot tell the things that you have brought us through and the way that you have kept us and provided for all of us. I thank you for it. And our final song that we're gonna have today is Land of Endless Tomorrows. And then after that song, it will conclude our service.
Our days are numbered down here, and one day it's all gonna end. But those who love the Lord know by faith there's so much more up where the living begins. In that land of endless tomorrow, where the soul will never die, where we'll never say goodbye. There'll be no more tears, no more sorrow. In that land of endless tomorrow. And oh, how precious the moment I stand before the Lamb on His throne. For when I see my Savior's face, the one who saved me by His grace, I will know that I'm finally home. In that land of endless tomorrow, where the soul will never die, where we'll never say goodbye. There'll be no more tears, no more sorrow. In that land of endless tomorrow. Tears will never stain the streets of that city. No wreath of death on my mansion door. There'll be no more tears, no more sorrow. In that land of endless tomorrow, there'll be no more tears, no more sorrow. In that land of endless tomorrow.
In just a moment, we'll be departing to Great Lakes National Cemetery. For those of you that are in the procession, when you step to your vehicles, please turn your bright headlights on, your flashers, and travel safely and as close to the car in front of you as you can. We may go through an intersection as green and it may turn red while you're in it. If we stay together and appear connected, people will yield in caution for us. So remain alert and drive safe as we travel. If there's anybody here that did not get in the funeral procession but would like to join us at the cemetery for military honors, there will be gentlemen in the parking lot with flags, and they will show you where to park and help you get in line so you can join us there. If any of you are going to be pallbearers today, after our dismissal, we're going to look for you in the foyer of the funeral home right near the front doors. So gather there. You'll have time to start your vehicles if you need to and get them warm, and then come back in and wait for us, and then we will send for you when we're ready for your services. We're going to give everybody a chance to pass by the casket should you choose to. If you decline that, please go right to your cars. We are on a time frame of arrival at the cemetery, and we'll need to be leaving the parking lot at 1:25. So it's real important that as we have our dismissal, we're somewhat efficient. and then step right to your car so we can depart the funeral home. We're going to start from the back of the funeral home and give everybody a chance to step forward should you choose to, pass by the casket, and then go to your vehicles if you would, please. Thank you. May I also say to you that when we arrive at the cemetery, where we park is not where we're going to end. So it's real important when we arrive at Great Lakes National Cemetery, stay in your vehicles. They will lead us down to an outdoor shelter for prayers and for military honors. So do not leave your vehicles until we move a second time or we move after we've arrived, okay? And that'll be at 2 o'clock. Thanks.